Feminism leads to whores. Whores lead to single mothers. Single mothers create weak beta males. Beta males create a weak society. A weak society creates communism. Communism creates death. This is the cycle.
All right, people, what's going on? So, I don't know how many of you guys watch any kind of red pill material. I've watched a bit of it, not a whole lot. But if you've watched any of it, you know that these guys, they all have sort of similar talking points. They all say the same things. And at this point, 2024, the red pill is kind of worn out. Like everybody knows the talking points. And the talking point that this guy just gave is one of the major ones. Women are pretty much the cause of, societal's downfall. Now, what this guy is doing, in my opinion, is he's taking I think it's a Jordan Peterson talking point, or maybe Joe Rogan. I think the original talking point is, strong men give hard times build strong men. Strong men build good times. Good times build weak men, and then weak men bring about hard times. Something like that. But this guy is kind of putting it on women, and then he's kind of skewing the point. But here's the deal. I can't agree with what this guy is saying. I have to put the blame on men. And the reason I put blame on men is because of two things that I enjoy, or at least one of the things that I enjoy. Anime, gaming. If you look at these two spaces, you can see exactly what men have done over the years to destroy it. You can easily make the argument that women have destroyed that space, or those two respective spaces. But let's look at the history of just those two spaces to understand how men have destroyed society as a whole. If you guys know anything, if you're over 35, you know that back in the day, there was no Kai Cenat, there was no Dr. Disrespect, there was no one who was getting rich from playing video games. That just wasn't what it was. When it was just Sega and PlayStation 2, if you were a gamer, you were gaming by yourself or you were gaming with your friends, but there was literally no future in it. Over time, the game space, the video game space, was cultivated and it became something that was massively profitable. It's still massively profitable. At the same time that things like PlayStation 2 and PlayStation were blowing up, you had the anime space that sort of started to get its legs. When we talk about the anime space as we know it today, my first encounter with anime was like Dragon Ball Z and Gundam Wing, stuff like that. If you guys remember, back in about 2010, maybe 2008, from 2008 to about 2014, Xbox 360 had come out, and it came out before that, but it had come out, and all of a sudden online gaming became a thing. And it was glorious. I don't know how many of you played Halo 3. I don't know how many of you played the early Call of Duties, but those chat rooms, those chat lobbies were just ridiculously toxic. Like, you had to have super thick skin. It was so bad that it just became a meme unto itself before there were memes. So everybody was in these chat rooms and everybody was the N-word. Everybody, everybody's mom was on the menu for getting talked about, everybody's sister, everything. It wasn't a problem until losers got on there and, women and single moms. The losers obviously got bullied. The women obviously got bullied. And the single moms were watching their loser sons get bullied. Around 2016, 2017, there was a lot of restrictions put on the chat lobbies. And as you guys know, if you play games online today, you can't say anything. Everything is banned. Everything is toxic. Everything is bullying. Lots of stuff went on. And it was essentially just men in that space not telling the people to suck it up. Right? There were men behind the scenes who did not tell women, suck it up. You're here. You're not the only one getting bullied. Everyone's getting bullied. That black guy, as soon as he breathes through his nose, they're calling him the N-word and everybody's having a good laugh. Or maybe not. Mute the mic. How about that? The single mom, her son comes to her crying. No one wants to tell that person to suck it up. What happens is men behind the scene, they're so sympathetic to the people in that space, to the women in that space, because no one cared when when it was just boys getting bullied, no one cared. So once the women started crying, that's when people started caring. you're going to say that that's not true. You might say that that's not true. But I want you to remember, in around 2013, the girl Pokimane started streaming. And she was like, I want to say she was like 15 or 16, like she was super young. And around 2013 was also when Instagram took off. So if you remember, girls weren't really in the gaming space before 2013, not heavy. But around 2013, that's when they really got there. So you had girls like Pokimane start to pop up. So you had the first iteration of the e-girls. Then you had girls like Valkyrie. Valkyrie started streaming in like 2014, like the very next year. Like as soon as I think she started streaming when PS4 dropped. You know, a little bit later, you had the girl Anita. I forget what her name is, Anita something or other. She's the girl with Tourette's. She has Tourette's. All of these e-girls between 2013 and like 2018, like Instagram just exploded with e-girls and women going to these spaces that men had cultivated, the video game space mostly. They started going there and they were getting bullied, and you know, people were saying bad things about them. So men behind the scenes were like, oh no, I have to save this sweet e-girl. So the men behind the scenes started changing things. They started changing things in the space. If you're a gamer, you know the space is worse for it. And a lot of these girls don't even stream anymore. So there was this massive flood of e-girls who come to the space, and they don't want to pay their dues. Keep in mind, the men who built the space, they had to pay their dues. They got bullied in the real world for being into games and whatnot, wasting all their time on the game. They got bullied. The woman didn't want to pay their dues. So they whined, they cried, they complained. Men behind the scenes made a permanent change for a temporary problem, because those women ended up leaving anyways. Then around 2016, the anime space was it was already behind the scenes becoming very healthy, but it just like exploded around 2016, like right when Naruto ended. Like the manga was good. I think the manga is still going. Like maybe it's the Boruto manga, but I think the anime ended in like 2014 or 15 or so. I could be way off with that. I'm not 100% sure. But I know it exploded like right around that time frame, like 2015, 2016, the anime space. Now keep in mind, this is when Twitter was at its height, like between 2014 and 2018. Instagram's at its height. So the girls, the same e-girls, are now anime girls. The anime conventions are taking off. The girls like Pokimane and Valkyrie and all the rest of the e-girls, they are raking in dough. They're raking it in hand over fist because they're going into the male space. They're taking off their clothes, showing cleavage and whatnot, and they're getting attention. Keep in mind, the men went to these spaces. They cultivated these spaces into something that was profitable. And then what happens? The women come along looking for attention and looking for quick bucks, and they get it because the men in those spaces handed the keys to success over to those women without making them pay any kind of price. They make permanent changes to temporary problems in order to appease the women. Now you look in the game space, lots of games have gone super woke. They're really gay. The anime space is kind of fallen off because it's just been watered down. You had a lot of women in that space, so you can't do this and you can't do that. And I'm not even talking about the conventions. I'm talking about the actual creators of the mangas and the animes. A lot of things have gone woke, and a lot of people don't like it. But this is what I'm saying. Men will pay a price to cultivate a space. Gaming, anime, whatever. They'll get laughed at, they'll get ridiculed, they'll get persecuted, but they'll cultivate that space. Once that space is cultivated, women come. They want to be a part of it. They say, you can't exclude us from what you built and what you sacrificed. And then they'll also say, you can't subject us to what you had to go through to build this. You have to just give it to us. This is why I mentioned the women didn't want to pay their dues. They didn't want to get laughed at. They didn't want to get bullied. They didn't want any of that. They just wanted the ability to come to the space and reap the benefit. And keep in mind, I'm not saying that everybody should have to necessarily sacrifice like that. I'm just saying the men built that space for themselves, and it was harsh for everyone involved. There was only a few people who just walked in that space and just really dominated. Most people had to pay some sort of dues. There was a good level of gatekeeping, and that kept the space pure, and that kept kept the space, honest. But the women came and they whined and they cried and they complained, and things changed because the men gave them the power. The men started hiring women to be CEOs and putting women in positions of power and, letting them write not legislation, but letting them write the rules and determine what's bullying and what's harassment and so on and so forth. Keep in mind, I'm not saying that these spaces should have stayed barbaric. I'm just saying that you cultivated a space that, most likely it existed because a lot of men, they may have been losers. Right. So the video game space was a place for everybody to come together. Winners and losers could come together and enjoy something, and nobody's getting judged necessarily, except on your skills at the game. The anime space, definitely a lot of men, predominantly men, who would have been considered losers. In these spaces, you had a lot of men who did not necessarily fit in the real world, who were looking for some form of escapism, and they found it in this space, and it was cultivated by those men. And what happens? The women come in, and those women weren't losers. They weren't necessarily losers. They weren't all fat sweat hogs that couldn't get a boyfriend. A lot of them were fairly attractive women or extremely attractive women who could easily get a man. They go to this space and they are flooded with attention. Keep in mind, Twitter, before there was OnlyFans, there was Instagram. Instagram was the original. I think Instagram might be older than like Tinder, right? Before there was Tinder, there was Instagram. So these women were getting flooded with attention. Now, it might not have been the guys that they wanted, but if you know women, you know they love attention. So they're flooded with attention, and they want the highest quality of attention. So they don't want you to be able to say anything negative about it. So then they forge the space into something where they have easy access and you can't dispute them being there. You can't talk about how good or not good they are at the game. You can't talk about, them taking their clothes off. It's just this whole thing. I can't get on board with men saying that women are ruining society when almost every area of society was built and cultivated by men. Engineering, built and cultivated by men. Healthcare, built and cultivated by men. Men had to pay their dues, blood, sweat, tears, time, whatever the case might be, to cultivate any and every space. And what happens? You give up the power to women. There's no gatekeeping, and you give up power to women and you allow them to change a lot of the spaces. You allow them to change a lot of things in America or just in society in general that shouldn't necessarily be changed. And keep in mind, I'm not saying that you should be exclusionary, right? As a black man, I can't say that people should just be exclusionary because there's spaces that I need access to. But I think every space that you might want access to, you should have to pay dues, right? If you go to a prestigious college, it used to be you had to be the best of the best to get into that college. Harvard, Yale, Princeton, so on and so forth. But then they went woke and they let everybody in. Now they're a hotbed of radicals. The Luigi Mangione, he went to Harvard. These woke colleges, instead of gatekeeping like you're supposed to, you let anybody in. And what do? They want to change everything. When you let people into your space and they either didn't pay the price or they complained about the price that was necessary to be paid to get access to that space, when they get in, they're not going to be appreciative. They're going to be like roaches. They're going to be like pests, right? They will be very parasitic to what it is that you have built. When you let people in for no price, there's no gatekeeping. You don't check them, right? To make them sacrifice and essentially buy in with time. This is what you're going to get. And in America, there's a lot of spaces that women have access to that they did not pay any kind of time sacrifice. They didn't sacrifice their time to get to that space. And what happens? They ruin it. Perfect example, Rachel Nichols, the ESPN news reporter, the ESPN reporter. She's been working at ESPN for like 20 years or more. She paid her dues. I remember her reporting when I was a kid. She was fired for Malika Andrews or something like that. Like she was relieved of her duties so that a black woman could get a shot, and the black woman hadn't paid her dues. And Rachel Nichols was actually caught on camera saying, "Hey, give her all the opportunities you want, but don't take mine. She has to earn hers." She got fired for that. So you put people in spaces where they don't belong, or I won't say where they don't belong. I'll say where they haven't paid their dues. And what do? They tear it apart. So when the red pill talks about people, like when red pill talks about women lowering the quality of society, I can't necessarily get with that. Who gave them the power? Who gave them the access to destroy society? I have to put it on men. And this is why, like I've done several videos on Travis Hunter, and people will actually comment and say, well, why do you care? That's that man's business. When one man becomes a simp and becomes weak, he entices other men to become weak simps, because every man wants access to women. So when one man sees another man doing something that shouldn't be done to get a woman, to keep a woman, to please a woman, he'll say, well, I'll do that. And then all of a sudden, you got a nation of simps. This is why we police each other. This is how societies work. Men set the standard. So this is why it's important for men to be in other men's business. And it's always the weak men who don't care about society, who don't pay any blood price for society. You don't do anything for society and you say, why do you care what another man is doing? Because it lowers the quality of society as a whole. And then everybody turns around and blames it on the woman. Women, there's no reason, there's no expectation of women ever to be the people who build, maintain, repair, protect, or advance society. It's just how it works. So I'm not going to beat this into the dirt. I don't know. How do you guys feel about that whole talking point about women being the thing that lowered the quality of society or that made men weak? And how do you guys feel about the anime space and the gaming space or any space, engineering, medicine, academia? How do you guys feel? Like, what if there's a space out there that you are interested in, and that space used to be good and it's no longer good? What do you guys think is the main problem? What caused that space to be lessened? Do you think it was, super liberal women, or do you think it was weak men? Let me know in the comments. All right, I'll get at you guys on the next one. Peace.